Right, good afternoon, and welcome to the live streaming for today. And I say good afternoon because I'm right here in Scotland. For those people that are in other parts of the world, uh, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, depending on on what the time is at your end. Today, just like we've mentioned, I will actually be running through the what we call the history and basics of self-determination, for especially, and this is actually directed at the Yoruba nation agitators. We'll be looking at partly history, what we could consider as international regulations and some laws are, how they came into being, and then we look at what exactly we should be doing at the moment in Yoruba land. I've prepared like two documents which I'll be using in the course of this piece. Remember again, the station is OY Media Scotland. And of course, what we'll be talking about is history and basics of self-determination. Remember, as we're streaming live here, we are also on YouTube. So on YouTube, just type in OY Media Scotland, and that will be you. The things we'll be picking up straight off is this piece. Like I said, I've got about three resources here, and it will go from how what eventually find its way into the United Nations documents regarding self-determination of nations, whether they are ethnic group, or people that are within the same territory. And of course, what are the other things we should be thinking about? We know that people could actually put in for a self-determination agitation, but is it all that could be accepted? It's a definite no, and we'll be looking at it today. Remember also, like I said, we're actually targeting this to the Yoruba nation agitator, so that we'll know what we should be doing at this time, and of course also know what are the other things we should have at the back of our mind when we are dealing with this. The first piece that I'll be using today comes under the title Ethnic Groups' Right to Independence, Determination, Secession, and the Post-Cold War International Relations. Many people would we will have heard when people will tell us that almost every nation has a right. I mean, every people, ethnic communities or group of that have a sort of a cultural identity, but also people that have like if they are within the same area, which they call territorial and political landscape. So they have that right. But then let's look at some couple of things we should take note of right here. I'm going to pick bits and pieces from this piece, which is quite extensive, and I'll just try to pick what is very, very important for us at the moment. Before going into it, we would like to appreciate those people that have been speaking out against what is happening in Nigeria generally, because what has happened or what is happening is not just affecting us as Yorubas, it's also affecting other people as well. But then we believe that we've got to a point where each ethnic group, if we can call it that, needs to hold their own stand. The point of all ethnic groups in Nigeria coming together to talk about how Nigeria should be, it has not worked. And most likely, I don't want to be pessimistic here, but most likely the way things are, it will not work. So we have to now come to the point whereby an ethnic group needs to take their own stand on what they want and then push it forward. Then the other people will be moving them there, will be meeting them there if they so want. We've had a similar a similar issue in the past, especially during the time in the 60s when we had the regional government. That is when the Western region proposed to have education, basic education for all. The other groups believe that it's not possible. And because the Western region doesn't have to wait for the other ones, the party in government then, that's the AG, led by Chief Obafemi Awolowo, just went on and they put the policy in place. And of course, at the end of the day, the things worked as the government then proposed. Then most of the other ethnic group from the east and from the north, whose leader initially said it's not possible, obviously they came and they benefited from that free education. So if we look back at the history of Nigeria, we could see clearly that except each ethnic group, well, I don't want to say major ethnic group, I wouldn't want to say that until we're able to go through the resources that have gathered for us here, because just like we all have, all ethnic group, has a right to self-determination. They have a right to self-government, but also there are some couple of things that they have to meet, and vis-a-vis, if they put things side by side, by the government, the central government, and the group that is looking for self-determination, there are some things that the central government could actually put forward, and the international body will accept it as a reasonable excuse not to grant that self-determination. So hopefully we'll come across those things in the course of this interaction. So I'll take it straight on from the ethnic groups' rights to independence, self-determination, secession, and post-Cold War international relations. Many conflicts around the world today are between the central government of a given state and ethnic groups within that state. The ethnic groups demand independence or autonomous rule, while the central government refuses to concede to such demands. How should the international body treat this kind of ethnic conflict? That is, by which standard should the central government position and a particular ethnic group's demand for independence or autonomy be evaluated? How absolute is the central government claim to preserve territorial integrity? More so, do ethnic groups inherently have the right to claim independence or self-rule to begin with? There are no clear-cut answers to this question. However, discussions about self-determination and secession have become active in recent years, especially in view of the many cases of resolving ethnic conflicts that erupted after the Cold War that have impacted on the way to think about self-determination. This particular resource attempts to offer a way to understand the claims of ethnic groups in the context of recent developments. And self-determination and its claimants. Self-determination, by definition, is act of a particular people or an ethnic group to exercise its sovereign right to become an independent state and to decide on the form of state, including the system of government. The former, regarding independence, is called external self-determination, and the latter, regarding the choices of the form of the state system, is called internal self-determination. And those are the two things I think we have in Nigeria at the moment, agitation of the Yoruba nation people. Some are calling for a complete secession from the country, which is called external self-determination, while some other people are talking about the Yoruba people having their own region and having their own government, and that's the one that is called internal self-determination. Now, the genesis of principle of self-determination as a concept in international relations can be traced to World War One. More precisely, the 14 points made by US President Woodrow Wilson in his speech to Congress in 1918. As you well know, during the World War, United States was not actually active right from the start, but the US got engaged later on. So Wilson had in mind to allow for independence to the separate nations in the Balkans who had been victims of the politics of balance of power that dominated European international relations. However, the application of the principle of self-determination was not consistent. Take note of this. It was only applied to those nations within the former Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman empires that were defeated in war, and the Asian and African colonies of the victorious powers were left as colonies. And that's where you have some of these differences where we have, and it's been happening for time immemorial, where you have different rules for different people, for different countries. So even in the speech of former US President Woodrow Wilson, they were talking about self-determination for some countries, but those were countries within the Austro-Hungarian and Ottoman Empire. But for the countries, the Asian and the African countries that were defeated during that war, they left them as colonies. So you see, when people talk about maybe the United States or Britain or United Nations coming to do things for us, we should have it at the back of our minds that they will come with their own interest. And that's why we are encouraging that whatever we want to do, we should decide it and they should come in as observers and not as people to organize those things for us. Now, there are 2 points we need to recognize when it comes to the issue of self-determination. One is the idea of international guarantee of self-determination. United Nations, world bodies, there's a guarantee that each people or ethnic group or people that are within the same territorial space could actually, that they have right, let's put it like that, they have right to self-determination. So the principle of determination, self-determination was conceived as a notion of global governance. Please be taking note of this. Whichever country that is, whichever people or ethnic community that is calling for a self-determination, that they want to have their own, either a separate nation or a nation within a nation, bear in mind that there's the interest of the global governance. And that is why most of these international organizations and nations will get involved in what is happening in a place. So now, to guarantee those nations who did not have the power themselves to become independent, so they could get involved. And like I said, if they get involved, their own interest will be there. Even the ones that are not actually seeking for self-determination, we've seen in all the nations where either United Nations or US on its own had gone to interfere. We've seen what is happening. I mean, let's look at a place like Libya. Libya has never been the same. And of course, we've got reports, published reports that were not denied, that we have US companies, oil companies, lifting oil in Libya, because I mean that was the interest, or that is the interest they had when they got involved. So we need to be very conscious of that. So the first principle, I'm talking about two things to note very, very importantly. The first one is the idea of international guarantee of self-determination, which is conceived as a notion of global governance to guarantee those nations who did not have the power themselves to become independent. The second one is the nature of self-determination as a social contract. So what it means, Wilson advocated that the self-determination of the Balkan nation should be carried out along the lines respecting the historically formed allegiance and nationality. Now, the underlying view was that a nation should be defined less as a naturally or objectively defined characteristics as a nation than as a body with the will to independence shaped through the course of history. Now, the import of that place, and we'll get to that later, is that Wilson believed, or his advocation was that if they were going to have the Balkan nations, if they were going to have like a sort of an independent society out of the main nation, then it shouldn't really be along ethnic identity. They believe that it should be along historical formed alliance and nationality. The importance of that, the importance of that to them is that when you have a nation that is already together and they have a sort of an historical alliance part, and they've been together like a nation being within the same area. So somebody could say that, okay, if we give these people, let's say they get their self-determination, we can still carry out international trade. Remember that I spoke about the nation, the country itself, why the central government or the federal government, like we'll say in Nigeria, one of the reasons they will oppose any nation that or any nation, because we have basically nation, we have Yoruba nation, we have the other ones there. The reason the government will object to a nation going, what they could use as excuse is to talk about territorial integrity. To say that, okay, if this nation goes, is going to destroy or will put the territorial integrity of that nation in jeopardy. And if they can prove it, definitely the international body will not come to support that group, because this has been put in right on there that there has to be respect for territorial integrity of the nations or of the country. Apologies. The nations are actually like Yoruba nations and the other one, but the country itself is Nigeria. So we have that issue about the area. And let me point to this example, which we have in Yoruba at the moment. We have the main Yoruba group in Oyo, Ekiti, Ondo. We have that in Lagos, Osun State as well. But also we have part of the Yoruba people in Kwara. We have part of the Yoruba people in Kogi, and even outside of Nigeria, like in Benin Republic and Co, we have Yoruba people. So when this thing is going to be done, those are the things that will be looked at. Of course, if the country is going off, let's say the way that we have agitations with the Yoruba and the Biafra now, if things are happening the same time, that automatically dissolve Nigeria. But in the case that it is one of them that wants to leave, and the other two states at parley, and they can claim that before the international bodies that if this nation is allowed to go, the territorial integrity of those people that remain within the Nigerian boundaries, that the territorial integrity is going to be breached, then there's a problem. And we quite understand that majority of our people, they are quite very passionate about the Yoruba nation. There have been quite lots of protest that is going on. I won't call it protest in the real sense of it, but call it campaign that has been going on. I mean, which is very great. But then for those of us that can sit down and look at the agitation outside of the box, let's look at what is or what are the international rules of engagement when it comes to issues like this. Then we need to sit back and begin to look at it, because there are two ways, and I think I've mentioned this to many people. One is if we want to go into war. If it's war, then there's no point having all those agitations. And when I talk about war, it's not really about Yoruba, because I don't think that is what we need. It's not really about Yoruba going to attack others. But we have a right to self-defense. So, but before we can do that, that means all those people that are representing us at the federal level, all our governors, all our representatives, they have to pull back home. If they leave their post, then we can say that we are not taking part in government, and we are ready to defend ourselves if the federal government decides to attack us. But some of those people that are leading us, they've started saying that, no, we don't want war, we don't want to fight and go. So if we don't want to fight, if we don't want war, then we should do things the way we should do it. Now, back to the piece that we're talking about. So we've spoken about the two things, which is a right, a guarantee, international guarantee for self-determination. But the conditions that are there is clearly showing that that right is not absolute. A central government or a federal government, in the case of Nigeria, can actually bring up a reason why the nation should not be allowed to go. If you can prove that there is going to be a breach of the territorial integrity of the country. Meanwhile, I don't think that is applicable to Yoruba, because Yoruba seems to, where we are within Nigeria seems to be around almost like the same area. So we've not actually gone into, because you have some tribes, when you check the map, you see part of them flowing into the middle of another tribe. But then that is not the sort of things we have in Yoruba land at the moment. So, but just to let us know that that right to the international right, acclaimed right of self-determination is not absolute. There are still some things that will be checked before the international body. We even if there's war, before they will come in, and whatever decision they are going to make, it will be based on what each side has presented. So now let's quickly go on. The underlying view was that a nation should be defined less as a naturally or objectively defined characteristic as a nation than as a body with the will to independence shaped through the course of history. After World War II, the notion of global governance to guarantee self-determination evolved further. Article 3 of the United Nations Declaration on the Granting of Independence to Colonial Countries and Peoples of 1960 stated, inadequacy of political, economic, social, or educational preparedness should never serve as a pretext for delaying independence. This means that the condition for the formation of state need not be all met in order for independence to be recognized. With the two international covenants on human rights, that is, International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economics, Social, and Cultural Rights of 1966, that declared in Article 1 that all peoples have the right to self-determination. The notion of self-determination developed into a right. However, with the definition of that people, that is the nation, as yet undecided, it also means that every conceivable nation's demand for independence had to be recognized, however small the size. In order to prevent the proliferation of demand for secession, Article 6, and these are very important. You know, it's just like almost like what we tell people when people read the Bible for an example, just to cite that example. If you just pick one verse, there's the likelihood that you are going to read it out of context. But if you want to really understand that particular verse, that means you have to read where it's coming from, maybe some couple of verses before that verse, and then some verses after. And that is just to get the context of what the verse that you are picking at the middle, what it is. So when you look at some of these articles of the United Nations and all that and co, you will see one article that says, yes, you have this right. But then you go to another part of the article, and then it begins to tell you that that right that was said in Article 1 up there, you have to meet this condition before you can have that right. So we have to be quite very careful about this. So let's take it. Now, however, with the definition of that people, that is a nation, as yet undecided, it also means that every conceivable nation's demand for independence had to be recognized, however small the size, in order to prevent the proliferation of demand for secession. That is, so that it is not all people, ethnic people, social people, people within the same land space area, so that it's not everybody that will just be coming up and be demanding, oh, we want to go, we want to be on our own. Because remember that the more nations we have, the more difficult is the international trade, and for which United Nations and member of the United Nations will actually want to take the interest of global trade most of the times above the demand of a people for secession from a country. Now let's take it on. Article 6 of the Declaration on the Granting of Independence to colonial countries and people inserted the caveat that any attempt aimed at the partial or total destruction of the national unity and territorial integrity of a country is incompatible with the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations. And that's what I'm talking about. Yes, every people, Yoruba people, Igala people, Biafra people, Hausa people, Fulani people, even among the Yoruba, somebody can say, yes, the Jebu people or the Egba people, Lanko, all of that's right. They've got right to self-determination. They've got right to say, yes, we just want to be a nation on our own. We don't want to have anything to do even with other Yoruba people. We just want to be Jebu nation or be a Egba nation or so. The Aworis could come up and say, no, we want our own nation. Yes, the United Nations Charter recognizes that they have that right. But with that right also comes this clause that any attempt aimed at the partial or total destruction of the national unity and territorial integrity of a country is incompatible with the purposes and principles of the Charter of the United Nations. So we see that the right to self-determination is not absolute. That is, it goes beyond talking about, yes, it's Yoruba now, Yoruba. No, we have to, the campaign, sloganeering, campaign, the propaganda is part of politics. But beyond that, all the people that are agitating for a Yoruba nation, either as a separate nation from Nigeria or a nation within a country, including restructuring and everything they're talking about, they need to get people that knows what they are doing. They need to get them to sit down and study all these articles of the United Nations. I will say this, but carefully. During the time when the Biafra wants to secede from Nigeria, up to today, the people, our brothers and sisters from that side, are still saying that, oh, it's the Yoruba people that didn't allow us to go because of what they did, because they supported the federal government when they were doing this to us and doing that to us. I can guarantee you that today, if Yoruba nation decides to go on the path of we decide to go on the path of war, and when I'm saying war, we don't go to attack anybody, but then that we have a right to defend ourselves. Don't be surprised if some of the communities and other ethnic groups in the military will support the federal government to take us up. Keep that one at the back of your mind. So, but what we're saying is that if the government, that's the federal government, if the government could present what is like an evidence that these people cannot go, because if they go, then they are going to disrupt our national integrity, our territorial integrity. If they can present that evidence, the United Nations will not support that country, that new nation that wants to be formed. So we should be careful about that. And that is why we are saying that let's do things the way it should be done. If it's done in the way that it should be done, then we will achieve what we want to achieve. So let's quickly dig about right. We'll continue a different session of this so that I don't bother you that much with each section, because I want us to understand this and be able to take the proper step that we should take. Now, quickly, so in view of international relations at the time, these had the objective of discouraging former colonial masters, that's the metropolitan state, from aiding new colonialist conspiracy for secession, together with principles of non-interference between sovereign states in each other's internal affairs and respect for former colonial borders. This article gave certain grounding for not granting the right to self-determination to groups seeking to break away within already independent states. Moreover, during the Cold War, the internal coherence within their ideological camp was deemed of utmost importance, suppressing any move that would disrupt it. In such circumstance, ethnic conflict became protracted without any prospect for resolution. So, because of that caveat, you see most of the nations that want to pull out from their country having to go into straight head-on conflict with the central government of such country. Such was the way with which self-determination became limited to decolonizing states after World War II, and paths to independence became foreclosed to groups within these newly independent states. As a result, The definition of the body seeking self-determination remained unarticulated and leaving it to debate on secession in the post-Cold War era. I'll be leaving it at this part today. If you want to check the 14, because it was 14 points that the former US president did made in 1918 before the Congress. If you check the 14 points raised by US presidents, you will see it. I've got it right in front of me here, and then I won't have time to read it one by one. But if you put it on Google, it will bring out what those points were, and those points were actually raised to advocate for nations, to seek for nation or people to seek for self-determination. And remember, the self-determination, we have the internal self-determination, which is a nation within a country. That's what we had during the Western region. We have the Western region, we have the Eastern region, we have the Northern region. But good enough for us to, those three major regions were clearly identifiable by ethnic groups that have similar culture and language. So I'll be finishing up on this part today. When I come back your way, we'll then be talking more about this. But what I want you to take away from what we've discussed today is, first of all, there is international guarantee for self-determination. It's internationally guaranteed. Your group wants to have a nation on your own, and just to correct this notion as well, and people will have told you many times, you will have heard it, that Nigeria is not a nation. Nigeria is a country. So when you are really talking about a nation within Nigeria, you have nations within Nigeria. You have the Yoruba nation within Nigeria. The Hausas, obviously there's an issue between the Hausas and the Fulani. So you might end up having Hausa nation up north and Fulani nation at the northern part as well. And of course, in the east, you have the Igbos, and then you have other sections that say they are not Igbos. And of course, at the middle belt, you also have nations around that place. And so when we talk about nations, bear it in mind that nation actually refer to the people who have the same cultural and language interaction. It's sort of an identity between the two of them. And of course, you do have some nations that will be a fusion of two, either through marriage and stuff, or because they live within the same area, you find them, although they can say they are distinct ethnic group, but they have like a similar culture, they have like a similar language, and they might just decide that, okay, they become one. And that's what we have. So when we refer to nations, we are talking about the people. And that is why Chief Obafemi Awolowo in those days said Nigeria is just a geographical space, that you cannot refer to Nigeria the way you will refer to a Scottish, because here in the UK, we have 4 nations in the UK. One of those is we have Scotland. The people in Scotland are called Scottish, although they are in the same United Kingdom with the others, but they have a sort of an ethnic identity. They are called Scottish, and Scottish gave name to Scotland. English gave name to England. Welsh, which is the name you call the people of Wales, Welsh gave name to Wales. And if you go to Ireland there, which is the northern part of Ireland is with us in the United Kingdom, those ones are called Irish. So you can see the identity of each of the nations within the UK. But in Nigeria, we don't have that identity. That's why the fact that we have nations within Nigeria, but you just call everybody a Nigerian. And it shouldn't be like that. Majority of people will say, and I think I align with them, that geographically, Nigeria is already divided geographically. And that's actually what we should have followed. So, but then that is just where we are today. My advice to those people that are agitating for a Yoruba nation, I mean, I am also one of those agitating for Yoruba liberation at the moment until things can become very clear. And I believe that people that are intelligent among us and people that have experiences of dealing with some of these things, you will want to have some things. You will want some things to be clarified before we can say that, okay, let's just become a nation that is separate on its own. There are lots of things to talk about. In fact, there is something that I'm going to read, which I think, okay, I think I'm taking this one from Effective, Taking Self-Determination Seriously. This is by K. Borg. There's a piece there that second, there is a clear basic logic that government works better when people can make decisions about it. Democracy is better than autocracy because people can choose their leaders. By very similar logic, self-determination should be better than territorial integrity because people can choose their policies. This matters in a direct sense as people are more likely to make decisions which favor their interests, and it also matters in the indirect sense where government will be incentivized to do better if they have to deal with a risk of secession. Presumably, there's no systemic empirical evidence on how governance improves when people can create or join a new country. But on priors, I don't see why it should be significantly less than the degree to which governance improves when people can pick new political leaders. What that paragraph is saying is that ordinarily, when people have their own governments, that is their own nation, and they can also, they can select their leaders, they can decide on the type of government they want, that things should ordinarily be better. But the individual here says that presumably there is no systematic empirical evidence on how governance improves when people can create or join a new country. So you might have a country that secede from another country and they're better off, and then you might have a country or a nation that secede from a country and then they are worse off. You now have power grabbers within now the new nation. You now have people that are maybe they have the followership, or you have the political power, or they have the money, and they want to take a chunk of that country for their own interests. So if all those things are not resolved before the nation pulls out of that country, then they will go on. It will be the same problem that they will be dealing with, and most likely you now begin to have clashes between people with vested interests. And that's exactly what Femi Falana, that is a lawyer, Chief Femi Falana, was saying, that people that are calling for Yoruba nation now, without making us to sit down and talk about what exactly do we want in that new nation? If we become a nation on our own, what are we going to put in place to ensure that those people that are quite powerful politically now, that have talks, that can do anything, they can disrupt election now because they've got the money, they've got the power, they've got the people. What are we going to put in place to ensure that when we get into that new nation, they won't be too powerful for us to handle? Those are things we need to resolve. And this doesn't concern the federal government of Nigeria. It doesn't concern the people in the East. It doesn't concern the people in the North. But within the Yoruba, we need to sit down and begin to say, okay, even if not even being a nation on its own, even within Nigeria, if we want to say that, okay, internal self-determination is what we want, something similar to the regional arrangement that time, that Yoruba wants to have their own nation within Nigeria, just like Scotland has the Scottish people in Scotland. They have their own parliament, they have their own representative, they have their own police, they have their own courts. We still need to start looking at what should we do, because the chanting we're having now, if that without putting preventive things in place and we go into that government, what will happen is there will be a conflict between political powers, and that will now make things to be worse than where we went from. And that is why a good number of us that are I had an interview the other day, and they were saying that, listen, those of you that were looking deeper into what we need to do, that you need to be out there, you need to be talking about this thing, so that the people that are, I mean, like I said, sloganeering, propaganda and co is part of the business. But then, after we've shouted on the streets, we need to sit back and look at what are the things we need to put in place so that we don't get into we won't get into a greater problem when it's not on our own. And the other will be saying that, you see, they were even better when they were in Nigeria. And that's you could look at the case of East Germany. You know, for some couple of years they separated from West Germany, but we see what happened. The West Germany was well, they were doing well. The Eastern Germany, they were a pity that even people will risk their life to jump from the eastern part of Germany into the west, until eventually they had to break down the wall that was raised to divide the two of them, and they now bring them together. So what we are saying basically is we need to know what the rules are before we start the trouble. Because like majority of people are saying at home, yes, the United Nations will come and do this. What we are telling you is that the United Nations has got articles, and we need to begin to look at that if this thing, if push come to pull, or is pull that comes to push, these are the people, some of us will think that, okay, we'll call the United Nations to come and resolve it for us. But before we do that, let's go and check the articles of the United Nations. Let's prepare ourselves, and even for our own good as well. Majority of you that knows me, you know that I'm a member of Yoruba Referendum Committee, which is insisting that we need to petition the governors and the speakers of the House of Assembly in all Yoruba states for them to pass a bill for us to have a referendum. The Yoruba people need to make their own decision, and we must allow. This is very important as well, and some of our elders have started, speaking about it. So there will be some people that will not support it. We need to hear their views. Why is it that they don't want to support Yoruba being on their own? some people will tell you that, the governors have money, they get security money every month. So, and they've not done anything with it. So are these the same power brokers that we will use when we get to whether it's a new nation or the nation within Nigeria? Are these the same people? Because those are the ones that will have the money and the capacity to run for election. Are these the same people? So some people are pissed off by the way some of our political representatives are behaving. So they will prefer that, here we can still get a little bit of protection. But then if we don't sort this out before we go into another nation or in another a nation within Nigeria, then these people will be too difficult for us to handle. So we need to hear them out. And it's democracy. People that don't support it, let them come out, let them make their case. People that support the Yoruba nation, either within Nigeria or outside, then you to present your case. We don't need to insult people. We don't need to be cursing people. What we are actually doing is telling those people that they should not have a mind of their own, that everybody must agree with us by force, and that is not democratic. In fact, the Omoluabi that we talk here in Yoruba, that does not represent the virtue of Omoluabi. Let people that do not agree with us, let them make their case. Let's hear them out. Falana said his own, that listen, you've not spoken to me what that nation is going to be. What do you need to run that nation? How many schools have you sat down to think about? This is the population of that Yoruba nation now. In another 5-10 years, this will be our population. The children between this age and age, these are the children we have now that are under school age. In another 2-3 years, they will be at the school age. How many schools do we not have to build? What health facilities do we have? Where are we going to get the money to do it? Some people will just be saying, yes, we have minerals all over Yoruba land. Yes, fine, we have minerals. But are all those minerals in economic quantity? Because one thing is for you to have minerals, the other one is that those minerals are in the quantity that we could actually use for economics. So if we've not done anything about it, we've not asked people to go and have a look at it, draw up documentations and stuff for us, then there's a problem. You are talking about, yes, we have the Lagos port and co. Now the international trade is thing. What if they may not block our port, but what if they divert what comes to Lagos into another part of the country? So we have to think about these things. But anyway, so we'll continue other time. I will let you know. It will always come with this title or this topic, History and Basic of Self-Determination. And remember, the reason for this is for us to begin to look at things beyond shouting Yoruba now on the streets. If we do things properly, we will achieve the desired results. But if we do not do things properly, we might end up into greater problems than what we have now, and that's the gospel truth. So please do stay on with us. Immediately after this, I've got just about 3 minutes to round this up. Your Itan Yoruba. Apologies, we had to switch it to the end of this program. The Itan Yoruba for this week will be coming on. And for anyone that wants to have a look at or read the resources that I have, like I've told you, look for the 14-point speech in 1918. And that is by ex-president or late President Woodrow Wilson. And that is U.S. engagement with the Allies and with Germany, and establishing or advocating self-determination for nations. And just like I said, it was one rule for the what would be like the Western world, and obviously another rule for the Asia and Africa. But I mean, it advocated self-determination. And also the second document that I've used, this is titled Ethnic Groups Right to Independence, Self-Determination, Secession, and Post-Cold War International Relations. The third one, which I read a bit part of it, is the title of that piece is Taking Self-Determination Seriously. Will be picking from those three in the course of educating ourselves about the agitation for self-determination. Please do not forget that we've got a petition right on. It's called Yoruba Referendum Committee's petition. Please search for Yoruba Referendum Committee on Facebook. And our approach is to have people petition the governors and the State House of Assembly in the Yoruba Southwest area. We want to petition them to make the referendum bill. We've already sent the referendum bill to them to make that bill into law. And once it becomes law, then that means we have a right to organize a referendum vote. And that is us doing our responsibilities. The one that the United Nations will do, they will just come and observe. They won't be doing it for us. So if we do that, and our governors were able to make them accountable to us, and we have the referendum law, then we can, all the insult and code that is going on now, there wouldn't be any room for it. Because the question at the end of the day will be, do you want this or you don't want this? And people will go and vote. You cast your vote. Nobody is fighting anybody, because it's different from, okay, yeah, do you want to vote for Mr. A or you want to vote for Mr. B? That is not the issue. The thing is, Yoruba, do you want this? Yes. Do you want this? No. And it's you that know what you are going to vote in there. So there's no point for anybody to be fighting, because other than during the debates where people that have issues about Yoruba, things that are happening, what is not being done, and how that will be different if Yoruba is on his own, either as part of Nigeria or outside of Nigeria, then they'll bring their case for the other people will also. I mean, there will be debates which will be healthy for everybody. So until then, my name is Samuel Oludare Jerokun, and please do subscribe to OY Media Scotland. That is on YouTube. If you type that in, you will get it there. And until I come your way again, just trying to get that sort of, okay. Until I come your way again, please do stay safe. If there's anything whatsoever that you do not understand, remember, you could always get in touch with us. Please send whatever question that you have to our email, and that is oymediascotland@outlook.com. Otherwise, on our Facebook, just drop us a comment and we will get back to you. Thank you very much for staying with us, and do stay on for the Itan Lady Yoruba. Thank you, and God bless.
ẹ kú kàlẹ̀ ń bẹ̀ òun ọkùnrin obìnrin ọmọdé àti àgbà olólùfẹ́ yín ìbùkún olúwa ọmọ Sànúsí tí ẹ mọ̀ sí Àpèkẹ́ tún dé pẹ̀lú àrà ọ̀tọ̀ àlọ́ tó kún fún ọgbọ́n òye àti ọ̀rọ̀ ìjìnlẹ̀ Yorùbá ẹ máa bá wa ká lọ àṣà Yorùbá kò mọ̀ ní parun.
Mo kí wa káàbọ̀ sí ìtàn òdòjọ́dẹ nínú igbó irúnmọlẹ̀ àti bá ìtàn wa dé ibi tí bàbá ti ń sọ ìtàn ọkùnrin kan ẹkùn àti kọ̀lọ̀kọ̀lọ̀ ìtàn mímáa ṣeré níwọ̀nba ìtàn má máa ṣe àṣejù. Ìtàn wa wá ń tẹ̀síwájú. Kí ni kọ̀lọ̀kọ̀lọ̀ ṣe gan-an náà? Nígbà tí wọ́n dé ọ̀hún, kọ̀lọ̀kọ̀lọ̀ kọjú sí ọkùnrin náà ó ní, níbo ni ìwọ dúró sí? Ọkùnrin náà sì tọ́ka sí ibẹ̀ wípé, ìyín ni. Kọ̀lọ̀kọ̀lọ̀ ní, ǹjẹ́ dúró síbẹ̀ kí n rí ọ? Ọkùnrin náà sì dúró síbẹ̀. Lẹ́yìn náà ni kọ̀lọ̀kọ̀lọ̀ yí padà sí ẹkùn ní, níbo lẹ́yìn wà ó jàre? Ẹkùn sì tọ́ka sínú àgọ́ irin wípé, níyìn náà ni. Kọ̀lọ̀kọ̀lọ̀ ní, bàbá, mo fẹ́ kí ẹ mọ̀ pé aláìmọye pátápátá gbáà ni mí. A máa pẹ́ kí nǹkan tó yé mi. Láì jẹ́ pé bá bọ́ sí ọ̀kọ̀ọ̀kan ibi tí ẹ dúró sí nígbà náà, orí rẹ̀ kò ní yé mi rárá. Ẹkùn bá múra, ó bọ́ sínú àgọ́ irin náà. Lẹ́yìn eléyìí ni kọ̀lọ̀kọ̀lọ̀ ní, ó wá ń yé mi bọ̀nà wá yìí. Ó tún kọjú sí ọkùnrin yìí. Ó ní, ìwọ èké yìí, mo ṣe bí o sọ wípé ìwọ ló yọ. Kí ń ṣe tí kò lè jáde fúnra rẹ̀, ṣé ilẹ̀kùn àgọ́ irin náà ni wọ́n ṣí sílẹ̀ yìí? Ọkùnrin náà ní, wọ́n ti nígbà náà ni. Kọ̀lọ̀kọ̀lọ̀ tún fèsì pé, báwo? Ọkùnrin náà bá mú ilẹ̀kùn àgọ́ irin ó pàdé omi. Báyìí ni. Kọ̀lọ̀kọ̀lọ̀ tún dáhùn ó ní, ǹjẹ́ ó tán pátápátá ẹ̀ ǹjẹ́ ẹkùn kò lè jáde mọ́ báyìí? Ọkùnrin náà bá mi ilẹ̀kùn náà wò ó rí pé ó sì gbọ̀ngbọ̀n. Ó dáhùn sí wípé ẹkùn kò lè jáde. Lẹ́yìn eléyìí ni kọ̀lọ̀kọ̀lọ̀ wọ ẹkùn. Ó bú sẹ́rìn ó ní, pẹ̀lẹ́ o ẹkùn, ọwọ́ bá ọ níwá yìí. Ó pẹ́ níbẹ̀ àforíṣu níṣe ni ọ́. Kànnàkànnà ẹ̀bá odò ni yóò sì yọ ojú olóore rẹ̀ jẹ. Máa bá tirẹ̀ lọ ìwọ ọkùnrin yìí, ṣùgbọ́n má ṣe gbàgbé àti fún mi ní adìyẹ mi, torí mo ti yọ ọ́ ní ti èyí náà. Kọ́lọ́run gbà ọ́ lọ́wọ́ àgbákò. Kólódùmarè má jẹ́ kí o rìn ní ọjọ́ tẹ́bi ń pa ọ̀nà. Bí a bá dé àárín ìlú, kó sọ fún àwọn ará ìlú pé ọwọ́ wọn ti ba ẹkùn tí ń yọ wọ́n lẹ́nu, kí wọ́n mú ọfà àti ìbọn, kí wọ́n sì mú àpò àti ọrún kí wọ́n. Bẹ́ẹ̀ ni ọba òkìtàn ó ronú títí kò sí èyí tí ó lè ṣe. Kọ̀lọ̀kọ̀lọ̀ fi ṣe ẹgbẹ̀ta ẹ̀sín, ọkùnrin náà sì fi ṣe ẹ̀ẹ́dẹ́gbẹ̀rin. Ìgbà ẹlẹ́yà fọ́ lé lórí, àbàwọn ẹlẹ́yà sì dà sí lára. Ó ń ṣẹ́jú pàkó, jẹbẹtẹ́ sì gbé ọmọ lé e lọ́wọ́. Ọkùnrin yìí ṣe bí kọ̀lọ̀kọ̀lọ̀ ti gbà á níyànjú. Láìpẹ́ àwọn ará ìlú dé, wọ́n sì pa á. Nígbà tí ó ń kú lọ wípé, gbẹ̀yìn ayé mi nìyí. Ìbá ṣe pé mo lo àǹfààní tí Ọlọ́run kan fún mi dáadáa, wọn kì bá ti gbà lọ́wọ́ mi. Bẹ́ẹ̀ ni ikùn káàánú ẹ̀ṣẹ̀ rẹ̀. Ṣùgbọ́n àkókò ti kọjá. Lóòótọ́ ronúpìwàdà, ṣùgbọ́n ọ̀run ti bọ́ sórí. Ó fi ìka àbámọ̀ bọ ẹnu, ó ń retí ohun tí yóò dé bá wọn. Ọlọ́run má jẹ́ kí á kábàámọ̀ irú èyí o. Mo ti fi ẹnu bà ti oore ṣíṣe lẹ́ẹ̀kan. Mo ti sọ irú ẹni tí ènìyàn bá ṣoore fún. Mo sì tún fẹ́ láti fi èyí kún. Àwọn ẹgbẹ́ mìíràn wà tí wọ́n fẹ́ ìlú wọn àti orílẹ̀-èdè wọn rékọjá wọn. Wọ́n á sì fi dandan jàgùdà páálí lé pé àfi bí àwọn ṣe ilẹ̀ àwọn lóore. Ọ̀run wá máa kan irú ẹgbẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ lẹ́mọ́lẹ́mọ́. Mo wí fún yín, ìrànlọ́wọ́ yẹ fún wọn. Bí ẹni ipa èèpìnì ẹ fún wọn. Bí ẹni ti kọ́bọ̀ ẹ fi ta wọ́n lọ́rẹ. Bí ẹni ti pọ́ùn ẹ fi ṣe ìrànlọ́wọ́ fún wọn. Owó rere ni ẹ ná, àlàáfíà ni yóò sì rọ́pò rẹ̀. Àwọn ọmọdé mìíràn wà tí orí wọn yá sí ìwé, tí wọn kò sì ní owó tó láti kọ́ dé ibi tí wọ́n fẹ́. Bákan náà sì ni àwọn ọ̀dọ́mọkùnrin pẹ̀lú. Ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ kò rí àyè lo ẹ̀bùn rere tí ẹlẹ́dàá fi fún un. Irú àwọn báwọn yìí ni olówó ìbá máa fi owó ṣe lóore. Ẹ kú ìjókòó ẹ̀yin ọ̀rẹ́ mi. Mo rò pé èyí tí mo sọ ní tòun ti tó. wọn ò parí ọ̀rọ̀ náà kí a máa fi ìyókù ọjọ́ yìí gbádùn ara wa. Bẹ́ẹ̀ ni a gbádùn títí ilẹ̀ fi ṣú. Ó wá kù ọjọ́ 5 tí a ó lò ní ọ̀dọ̀ Ìrágbèje, ṣùgbọ́n kò ní lè sọ àwọn ohun àbàmì wọn ní tí ojú wa rí àti tí etí wa gbọ́ ní ọjọ́ 5 náà nítorí àkókò ń lọ. Wọn kò kú dá inú lé ohun tí ojú wa rí ní ọjọ́ keje. A ń tẹ̀síwájú pẹ̀lú ọjọ́ keje lọ́dọ̀ Ìrágbèje ní ilé olójú méje àti àbọ̀ òkè láńgbòdò. Nígbà tí ilẹ̀ ọjọ́ keje mọ́ tí a jẹun tán, Ìrágbèje mú wa lọ sí òde, a sì yí gbogbo òkè láńgbòdò ká. Ó pẹ́ dẹ̀ kí a tó padà dé ilé. Nígbà tí a sì jẹun ọ̀sán tá bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí ṣeré. A sáré, ajá ìjàkadì, a fò, atakìtì, a gún igi, a sì fi onírúurú ọ̀nà dá ara wa yá. Níkẹyìn Ìrágbèje pè wá, ó sì mú wa lọ sí yàrá rẹ̀ kan tí ó kù tí a kò tíì wọ̀ nítorí tí a ti wọ yàrá 6 ní ọjọ́ 6 tí a lò sẹ́yìn. Yàrá ìkeje yìí yàtọ̀ sí àwọn tí a ti ń wọ̀ rí. Àti ilẹ̀ ni àti òkè àti ẹgbẹ́ ògiri ni àti ohunkóhun tí ó ṣáwà ní yàrá yìí ṣá ni. Gbogbo wọn funfun bí ẹ̀gbọ̀n òwú. Nígbà tí a dé ibẹ̀, Ìrágbèje tọ̀ wá síwájú rẹ̀ ní ìdúró. Ó sọ fún wa pé a kò gbọdọ̀ jókòó. Òun náà pàápàá sì dúró níwájú wa. Ó wọ aṣọ funfun, ó sì bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí sọ̀rọ̀ ní. A ti ń sọ̀rọ̀ nípa onírúurú nǹkan, ṣùgbọ́n lónìí a ó sọ̀rọ̀ nípa ẹlẹ́dàá wa. Ẹ̀yin ọ̀rẹ́ mi, ẹ̀yin alágbára, ẹ̀yin akọni gbogbo, ẹ̀yin akíkanjú ọkùnrin, ẹ̀yin tí ẹgbẹ́ kùtà nítorí àti ṣe ìlú yín lóore. Mo fẹ́ kí ẹ mọ̀ láti òní lọ pé bí oníwà ń wí tẹlẹ́yìn ń sọ, bí wọn kò bá ti fi ti Ọlọ́run ṣe, irọ́ ni wọ́n ń pa, èké ni wọ́n ń ṣe. Alákàrà ni wọ́n rí tí wọ́n ń pè ní elékùrú. Ọlọ́run tóbi púpọ̀, àlèyé lè ṣe ni, ẹlẹ́dàá wa ni, òun ni ọba ọ̀run, ọba ìkú, ọba ẹ̀rí, olódùmarè, ọlọ́jọ́ òní, ẹni mímọ́, ẹni ìyanu, aláàyè, olùbùkún, ọ̀gá ògo, oníbu ọrẹ, alátúnṣe, alákòóso ohun rere gbogbo, aláàbò, olùpamọ́, ẹnìkan ṣoṣo tí ó wà tí ó sì ń bẹ títí láéláé. Mo fẹ́ kí ẹ̀yin tí ẹ wá sí òkè láńgbòdò fetí sílẹ̀ kí n sọ ìtàn kúkúrú yìí fún yín kí ẹ bá lè mọ̀ pé olódùmarè tóbi ní ọba. Ọba kan wà tí ó tóbi púpọ̀. Ó lówó, ó bímọ, ó ní ìgbèríko ju gbogbo àwọn ọba ìyókù lọ, ó sì lẹ́wà gidigidi, ṣùgbọ́n ìwà rẹ̀ kò dára. Ó burú, ó tó èṣù, ó ní ìka ojú ọ̀bọ. Ó sọnù ojú ẹ̀gún òṣùṣù lọ. A máa fi gbogbo ọjọ́ ayé di ẹnu ká dúdúdú. Ọba yìí ti gbàgbé pé ìwà lẹwà ẹ̀. Ẹwà kan kò sí ní ibì kan tí ó sì burú tó ni. A máa lọ sí ilé Ọlọ́run. Ní ọjọ́ kan, bí àwọn akọrin ti ń kọrin nínú ilé Ọlọ́run tí alùdùrú ń ṣiṣẹ́ ọwọ́ rẹ̀, ọba yìí kíyèsí pé ọ̀kan nínú àwọn ẹsẹ̀ orin náà dùn púpọ̀. Adùn rẹ̀ sì ta àwọn tí ó kù yọ. Ṣùgbọ́n níwọ̀n bí ó ti jẹ́ pé èdè mìíràn ni wọ́n fi ń kọrin tí ohun tí wọ́n wí kò sì yé, ó béèrè ìtumọ̀ ẹsẹ̀ náà. Ẹnìkan bá la ìtumọ̀ rẹ̀ yé báyìí pé ó mú alágbára kúrò lórí ìtẹ́ wọn, ó sì gbé àwọn tálákà sókè. Ẹ̀yin ẹlẹgbẹ́ mi, inú bí ọba yìí gidigidi, òógùn bò ó lára, ojú rẹ̀ sì pọ́n kankan. Ìbá ṣe pé ó ṣeé ṣe ni òun ìbá yìnbọn lu alùdùrù. Ìbá sì jẹ́ pé ó wà ní ipa rẹ̀, ìbá bẹ́ àwọn akọrin lórí. Ó yí ojú padà sí ẹnìkan tí ó dúró lẹ́bàá ọ̀dọ̀ rẹ̀ wípé, jọ̀wọ́ rán mi létí nígbà tí ìsìn bá parí kí n kọ́ àwọn aláìmọye wọ̀nyí lọ́gbọ́n. Òní ni mo tó mọ ìdí rẹ̀ tí wọ́n fi ń ṣe ìsìn ní èdè tí kò yé mi. Àṣé wọ́n ń bú mi ni. Ní gbogbo orígun mẹ́rẹ̀ẹ̀rin ayé yìí, níbo ni wọ́n ti ṣàìgbókìkí mi? Ọba wa ni kò mọ̀ mí. Baálẹ̀ wo ni kò ní fi tèmi ṣe? Ọlọ́run ni ibùjókòó rẹ̀ lọ́run, èmi náà sì ní ta tèmi láyé. Èmi kò lè mú kúrò lórí ìtẹ́ rẹ̀ lọ́run, ó sì dá mi lójú pé òun náà kò lè mú mi kúrò lórí tèmi ní ayé. Báyìí ni ọba yìí sọ nítorí tí ó wà nínú ìrora. Ó ń bá Ọlọ́run kẹ́gbẹ́, ó gbàgbé ẹlẹ́dàá rẹ̀. Ṣùgbọ́n Ọlọ́run bí láti ọ̀run wá, ó sì rẹ́rìn-ín músẹ́. Ó wí fún màlíkà kan tí ó dúró lẹ́bàá ọ̀dọ̀ rẹ̀ pé, kọ́ ọgbọ́n láti ara eléyìí lọ. Ó kò gbọ́ bí aláìmọye ọba ní ti ń wí. Ó jẹ tán ó mu tán ó gbàgbé mi. Kò sí ọjọ́ kan tí èmi kì í gbọ́ kí àwọn ènìyàn máa gbéraga sí mi. Ṣùgbọ́n dípò kí èmi bínú sí wọn kí n sì fi ìyà tí ó tóbi jẹ wọ́n, àánú wọn á máa ṣe mí, màá sì rántí pé èmi ni ó dá wọn. Irú eléyìí tí ó ń sọ̀rọ̀ yìí gan, ṣe iṣẹ́ ọwọ́ mi náà ni. Ǹjẹ́ bí mo bá fẹ́ san fún un bí ó ti hùwà sí mi, kí ni mo ṣáà lè fi ṣe? Mo lè sọ ọ́ di ẹranko, mo sì lè sọ ọ́ di ewéko ẹ̀gbẹ́. Mo lè fi apá kan rẹ̀ ṣe ènìyàn kí n sì fi apá kan rẹ̀ ṣe ẹranko. Mo ti lè fi ìyà mìíràn jẹ́ kí ẹnikẹ́ni má ti rí irú rẹ̀ rí. Kí n sọ fún pé èmi ni ó dá, ṣùgbọ́n kò jẹ́ ṣe bẹ́ẹ̀ sí. Dídé kánkán lọ kí o sì gba ipò rẹ̀. Má ṣe fi ọwọ́ rẹ̀ kàn, ṣùgbọ́n fún un láyè kí ó ronú. Bí ó bá ronú pìwàdà, fi ipò rẹ̀ padà fún un. Lẹ́yìn tí Màlíkà yìí gbọ́ báyìí, ó ṣe bí Ọlọ́run ti rán an. Wéré ó kúrò ní ọ̀run sì wá sí ilé ayé. Kò tí ì tó ìṣẹ́jú kan tí ọkùnrin yìí sọ̀rọ̀ rẹ̀ tán nígbà tí Màlíkà náà kàn lára. Fi orun ńláńlá kún ọba náà. Lẹ́yìn èyí ni ó sọ gbogbo aṣọ ara rẹ̀ di àkísà ẹ̀wọ̀n, wúrọ̀rùn rẹ̀ sì di idẹ. Màlíkà náà sì sọ ara rẹ̀ tirẹ̀ pàápàá dàbí ti ọba yìí gan-an, àti ojú àti imú rẹ̀ rí bí ti ọba, kò tilẹ̀ sí ìyàtọ̀ kan ṣoṣo. Ó gbé ọba yìí kúrò ní ipò rẹ̀, ó gbé sí ibòmíràn. Ó sì jókòó ní ipò ọba. Wọ́n sì ń gbogbo ènìyàn bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí í wò bí ọba náà. Kò tilẹ̀ sí ẹni tí ó mọ̀ pé ìyípadà kan ń bẹ. Lákòókò tí gbogbo nǹkan wọ̀nyí fi ṣẹlẹ̀, ọba yìí sùn lọ. Nígbà tí wọ́n sì parí ìsìn tán, olúkúlùkù bá ilé rẹ̀ lọ. Ẹni tí ó ń tọ́jú ilé Ọlọ́run náà sì tilẹ̀kùn. Ọba tuntun yìí sì wọ ààfin lọ. Ó ṣe bí ọba àtijọ́ ti ń ṣe. Nígbà tí ó di àárín ọ̀gànjọ́, ọba jí. Nígbà tí ó sì wo àyíká, kò mọ ibi tí òun wà. Ó bá dìde, ó ń wá ọjọ́ ọ̀nà kiri. Bí ó rìn síhìn, á kọlu ìjókòó. Bí ó rìn sọ́hùn, á kọlu dùùrù. Ọ̀rọ̀ náà kò tilẹ̀ yé e rárá. Gbogbo ilé ṣókùnkùn dúdú. Ohun gbogbo sì rí jágbajàgba rédèrèdè. Nígbà tí ó pẹ́ ṣá, ó dé ibi ilẹ̀kùn. Ó bá lu ilẹ̀kùn pẹ̀lú agbára. Nígbà tí ẹni tí ó tọ́jú ilé náà sì gbọ́, ó sáré wá láti wo ohun tí ó ṣe. Bí ó sì ti dé ọ̀hún tí ó sì ṣílẹ̀kùn, kí ló máa rí? Ó rí ọkùnrin alákìísà kan jáde. Òun bá kiri mọ́lẹ̀, ó sá padà. Ó ṣe bí wèrè ni. Eléyìí ya ọba lẹ́nu, ọ̀rọ̀ náà kò sì yé e. Ó bá kọ orí sí ọ̀nà ààfin. Nígbà tí ó sì dé ẹnu ọ̀nà ààfin, wọ́n sì ti ilẹ̀kùn, ṣùgbọ́n àwọn kan sì sùn sí ẹ̀bá ibẹ̀. Ọba tuntun ni wà nínú ààfin lọ́hùn pátápátá. Ọkùnrin yìí bá gbilẹ̀, ó ní, ẹ ṣílẹ̀kùn fún mi. Àwọn tí ó wà lẹ́bàá ibẹ̀ sì dáhùn pé ó ta ni. Òun náà sì tún dá wọn lóhùn pé èmi ọba ni. Bí ó ti wí báyìí tán, gbogbo wọn bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí rẹ́rìn-ín. Wọ́n ní, alákọ̀ọ́rí òkú ọ̀mùtí, inú sì bí ọ ni. Ta ni ẹ̀ ń bá wí? Ẹ ò fi ẹni náà gbé ilẹ̀ nígbà tí ilẹ̀ bá mọ́. Bẹ́ẹ̀ ni ó bẹ̀rẹ̀ sí yọ wọ́n lẹ́nu tí ń sọ̀rọ̀ ọ̀rọ̀ ẹ̀rín, títí ọkùnrin kan fi jáde tí ó sì ṣílẹ̀kùn kí ó lè mọ ẹni tí ó ń yọ wọ́n lẹ́nu náà. Bí ọkùnrin yìí ti rí i, bóyá ó tún ti yára pa ilẹ̀kùn dé, ó ní, wèrè ni, ó ti sinmi, wọ́n fẹ́rẹ̀ máì tí ì bí ìyá mi, bí ẹ bá jáde ẹ gbé. Kí a má fa ọ̀rọ̀ gùn lọ títí, ibẹ̀ ni ilẹ̀ mọ́ bá ọba yìí. Nígbà tí ó di ọjọ́ kejì, ó wọ inú ààfin lọ, kò sí rìn púpọ̀ títí wọ́n fi mú un tọ ọba lọ. Wọ́n rò pé wèrè ni. Nígbà tí ọba yìí rí àánú ṣe púpọ̀, ó sì pàṣẹ kí wọ́n fi aṣọ mìíràn wọ̀ ọ́. Ó wí fún wọn pé kì í ṣe wèrè ni. Ó kàn jẹ́ ẹni tí ó lè dá ẹ̀rín pa ènìyàn púpọ̀ ni. Àti ọjọ́ náà ni ọba sì ti sọ ọ́ di ẹni tí yóò máa dá ẹ̀rín pa òun. Ó fún un ní ilé kan ní ààfin láti máa gbé. Ìtumọ̀ wọ̀nyí kò yé ọba àtijọ́ yìí. Ó dáhùn, ó ní, ojú àlá ni mo tilẹ̀ wà tàbí ojú ayé. Ní tí mo jẹ́ ọba lánàá tó ti di oníyẹ̀yẹ́ lónìí. Ọ̀rọ̀ wọ̀nyí kò yé mi. Bí ire àlàbọ̀rún di ẹ̀wù. Ọdún kan pé kò sí ìyípadà fún ọkùnrin yìí. Ìrònú dé bá a bí onígbèsè. Nígbà tí ó ṣe ibi tí ó ti ṣìnà yé, ẹ̀rù Ọlọ́run sì bà á gidigidi. Ọjọ́ tí ó rántí ẹ̀ṣẹ̀ rẹ̀ yìí jẹ́ ọjọ́ Sátidé, ọ̀sẹ̀ di ọ̀la. Nígbà tí ilẹ̀ ọjọ́ kejì sì mọ́, èyí tí í ṣe ọjọ́ ìsinmi, agogo ìkíní ọ̀sẹ̀ kò lù bá a ní ilé Ọlọ́run lọ́hùn ni ó lù bá a. Nígbà tí ó dé ibẹ̀, ó wólẹ̀, ó gbàdúrà kékeré fún ìdáríjì ẹ̀ṣẹ̀. Nígbà tí ìsìn bẹ̀rẹ̀, ó fetí sí orin tí wọ́n kọ, ó ń retí ìgbà tí wọn yóò kọ ẹsẹ̀ ìje lò. Nígbà tí wọ́n dé ibẹ̀, ó mú alágbára kúrò lórí ìtẹ́ wọn, ó sì gbé tálákà sókè. Ó ké igbe ńláńlá tó bẹ́ẹ̀ tí ó fọ̀fun rẹ̀ fi fẹ́ẹ̀ dòdò. Ẹ̀yin ará mi, igbe géńdé ni, ọ̀fun ọkùnrin náà tóbi jọjọ. Nígbà tí gbogbo ènìyàn sì bú sẹ́rìn, òun kò dá wọn lóhùn. Ó ní, bí ẹ lè rẹ́rìn ẹ máa rẹ́rìn, bí ẹ lè tàkìtì ẹ máa tàkìtì. Inú tèmi yé mi, mo ké igbe ńlá lónìí ẹ̀rẹ́rìn, ọjọ́ mìíràn ni mo búra múra kò lójú. Bí ọkùnrin yìí ṣe rí i pé nǹkan tó fa wàhálà tóun kó sí láti bí ọdún kan òun ni eléyìí, torí àfojúdi tí òun ṣe sí Ọlọ́run alágbára ni. Ìtàn ojú ọdẹ nínú igbó rúmọlẹ̀ á wá sí ìdánidúró ní ọ̀sẹ̀ tó ń bọ̀. Àti rin ìrìn àjò yìí láti bí ọ̀sẹ̀ bíi mélòó kan, àti káyà sókè àti retí rẹ̀ mú ẹ̀rù ti bà wá, tí ń wò pé kí ló fẹ́ dì, kí ló fẹ́ dà. Ó ti wá di ìparẹ́ báyìí o, ṣùgbọ́n mo mọ̀ pé ọ̀pọ̀lọpọ̀ nǹkan ṣì kù tá a máa jọ ṣe. Tító fi wá má di títà fi di ọ̀sẹ̀ tó ń bọ̀ náà ńkọ́. Ire àti ayọ̀ kò ní wọ́n nílé gbogbo wa. Ó dàbọ̀.
Ẹ kú kàlẹ̀ ń bẹ̀ wo ọkùnrin, obìnrin, ọmọdé àti àgbà olólùfẹ́ yín ìbùkún olúwa ọmọ Sànúsí tí ẹ mọ̀ sí Àpèkẹ́ tún dé pẹ̀lú àrà ọ̀tọ̀ àlọ́ tó kún fún ọgbọ́n, òye àti ọ̀rọ̀ ìjìnlẹ̀ Yorùbá. Ẹ máa bá wa ká lọ. Àṣà Yorùbá kò mọ̀ nípa ara.
Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ bọ̀bọ̀ alóyin lòun àpèdè má pè tànà, ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ ròde ìbànújẹ́ èèwọ̀ òrìṣà. Ṣẹ̀kẹ̀rẹ̀ lọ́ba ń jó, gbogbo wa ló mọ̀ yẹ, ká mú pátì dùn ṣe bí tiwa ni. Àrà ò ní tán nílé alára láíláí, ilé mo borí ilé mo bá lù. Àtàndá ti ṣẹ́kọ̀ náà, ẹ̀yin tẹ́ ń fẹ́ wa ẹ̀ máa ṣe gan-an.
Èmi ò lọ́nà méjì láyé tó dorin lọ, orin ṣá ni iṣẹ́ mi ò tó dá mi lójú. Ẹ pè wá síbi ayẹyẹ ìyẹn nígbàkúgbà, Yẹjẹ Mẹ́tì is a player o, Oṣùọ̀jọ̀ Ọlámímẹ́tì ló ń pèdè ẹ̀mújó, akọrin bí ẹni jẹ̀kọ́ o, ìjòyà. Ọlámímẹ́tì ló ń pèdè ẹ̀mújó, akọrin bí ẹni jẹ̀kọ́, ìjòyà.